Today we're going to be talking about types of distributions. So a distribution is the way that your data is spread out when you make a histogram. And we can use the way that it's spread out and the patterns that it makes to see if we can make predictions. So there are 5 different types of distributions that we are going to talk about today. But before we do that, I'm going to be using some real world examples that came from Google. So if you type in the name of a business on Google, part of Google Maps will pop up with a histogram of the hours that the store is open and when it is most busy. So our first type of distribution is uniform distribution. So when something is uniform distribution, it means that all of the bars are close to the same height. They're not all going to be exactly the same, but they're definitely all kind of in that range. They're all pretty close. So the real world example that I found is the Royal Bank on Spears Road on Tuesdays. They're pretty much busy about the same amount every hour that they're open. So when something is a uniform distribution, if I'm looking at when to go to the bank, it really doesn't matter because it's pretty much the same in terms of being busy all day long. Our second distribution is something called symmetrical distribution or normal distribution. And that's where if you look at where the peak is on your graph, it should be roughly the same on the left side and the right side of your graph. So if you were to take your graph and fold it in half, it should look pretty much exactly the same or close to on either side. So the real world example that I found was Fortino's on Lakeshore on a Saturday. And I noticed that that made a very nice symmetrical or normal distribution. And what that tells me is that probably the worst time to go would be between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but a better time to go would be first thing in the morning or later at night when it's not quite as busy. Our next type of distribution is called skewed to the left. So if you look at this graph, you'll notice that the left side of the graph is really low and the right side of the graph is quite a bit higher. So because the left side is really low, this is called skewed left. Now, some people think it might make more sense for this to be skewed right because that's where all the bars are. But when something is skewed, it means that's the really low side. So this is skewed left. So my sample graph here is for Planck Resto Bar on a Monday night. That if you take a look at their distribution of times here, there's definitely a peak in the evening when people are probably going out for dinner, and it's far less busy during the day. So this graph is lower on the left side than the right side, so it would be skewed left. Our next one is skewed right. Same idea as skewed left, except this time it's the right side of the graph that's quite a bit lower. So when the right side of the graph is lower, then we called that skewed right. I had a very hard time finding a real world example of this. I needed something that was busy in the morning, but not in the rest of the day. But there was a Tim Hortons on Burloak that on a Sunday was quite a bit higher in the morning and then lower as the day went on. My guess is they probably had a lot of busy Sunday morning church traffic. All right, my last distribution is a bi-modal distribution. So if something is bimodal, we've talked about mode. Mode is the most frequent, or in this case, it's going to be our tallest bar, the one that shows up the most. So bi means 2, so it means bimodal means there's going to be 2 peaks on that graph. So my example that I found was a Gabi restaurant on a Friday that they definitely have a big lunch rush and then they have a larger dinner rush, and they came out with this really nice bimodal graph. So there were 5 distributions that we talked about: uniform, symmetrical, skewed left, skewed right, and bimodal. And that's all you need to know about